Is your existing supply chain and logistics consultancy provider failing to deliver? Our experienced, thought-leading team at Loguru could be your choice for an intelligent and friendly professional supply chain. If you have a challenge in supply chain, procurement, or logistics, or maybe just want to improve the value you get from them, visit loguru.co.uk. Complete end-to-end satisfaction guaranteed.
Coming up in this episode.
I discovered Women in Logistics, a very supportive group that really did contribute to helping me grow my own confidence because they had a mentoring scheme which I applied for.
The Logistics Collective podcast is a series focused on the logistics industry, where there are many incredible stories to be told. We'll be speaking with those who've worked and are working within the industry today. What have been their experiences, good and bad, since joining, and would they recommend a career in the industry to others? Here's your host, Malcolm Pope.
Hello again, and welcome to the next edition of the Logistics Collective podcast. And today I have someone with me who has got a fascinating blend of skills at a very senior level, has worked in logistics and supply chain for a lot of her career, but also brings elements of, which I think is incredibly important, about career coaching and career development, and really looking at people's confidence in terms of how they can actually make a difference within their careers. But this is somebody that started as a graduate trainee at Lloyd Fraser Group, went to Panasonic as a business analyst, worked for Stanley Black & Decker as a process improvement manager, was in Tesco as a project manager, Coca-Cola as senior distribution development manager, and also supply chain development manager for Oxford University Press. Has worked as an innovation manager at a senior level in Kuehne + Nagel and XPO Logistics, and also now sits wonderfully for an incredible organisation called Dematic as the Market Development Director. And I'd like to welcome Danielle Dakin to our podcast. Welcome to you, and how are you today?
Really good today. Thanks for asking.
So I normally ask one probably mildly embarrassing question at the beginning of the interview. So if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Well, because a lot of my work is influencing people, it would be the influencer cape, so that I could sprinkle my magic and they'd listen to me and do everything that I wanted.
The cape of influence.
Yes.
It sounds a bit Harry Potter, strangely, as well, doesn't it?
Could be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I don't think you need it, in all honesty. But it's a good one. It's original. So thank you for that. Danielle, tell us a little more about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of alluded to the fact that I've got a couple of hats that I wear.
Sure.
So the first being Market Development Director at Dematic. And for those that are not aware, I guess Dematic is an organisation that designs, builds, supports automation software solutions really for manufacturing and warehouse operations. And my job within that is really to support the business from a strategic angle. And that's, I cover a couple of different markets, so grocery and third-party logistics, of which I'm very familiar with because I've worked in those industries in my past. And basically, the things that I'm doing is really trying to understand our customer and the industries that they sit in. So, what's happening, what are the challenges, and really so that we can help them do what they do better, really, in a nutshell, I suppose.
That's a good nutshell. So I'm going to throw you back into a time machine. We're going to go back to Danielle as a child. And what was your dream job as a child?
I think I actually had a few. So it started with, I wanted to be a dentist. And then a dentist came into school and gave us those red tablets to put in your mouth that shows kind of where you've got plaque. So I had a very red mouth afterwards and decided I don't want to be a dentist anymore. There was a time where I wanted to be a florist, and that sits quite well because I have a cutting flower garden. I'm not entirely sure where that came from. And then the last dream job that I remember wanting was to be a solicitor. And I actually went and had work experience at a solicitor's office when I was at high school, and then I decided that wasn't for me.
Okay, and why didn't you like it?
I think I got overwhelmed by seeing the stack of papers on the desk. Just sitting around all of that just felt a bit overwhelming, yes.
And it has that funny smell as well, generally, when you get all of it. So, no, I wouldn't like that. So, how did you get into, I can see that you were a graduate trainee with Lloyd Fraser Group, and that's a business that I've got fairly fond memories of because they worked as a contractor and did a damn good job when I was working with RHM. So what sort of sparked you to say, okay, there's a graduate trainee scheme and heavens, it's logistics?
Yeah, sure. It's actually quite an interesting story because I chose to enter the industry. And if I go back to university, so I went to Greenwich in London studying international business, and I majored in operations management because I wanted to do something a little bit different than finance, than marketing. It just seemed more interesting and appealing to me. And in my final year, there was an option to study logistics and supply chain module. And for me, I'd never heard of it before. There was a bit of, ooh, what's that? That sounds interesting, But as I was actually studying it, I remember we reviewed a book by Professor Christopher Martin. And there was an example of how you could manufacture a product, let's say in Asia, and then ship it to Europe for it to be finalized, for the specific market that it's going to. And I just found that really fascinating. So at the end of that module, I kind of decided, well, I think I quite like this. I think I'd like to look to see what opportunities there are in the industry. And to be honest, like any other graduate, I was quite open to the industry that I was going to join. I just wanted a job, really, more than anything. And 3 different opportunities came up for me. So one was kind of more in sales. The other was in government. And then finally, I had this opportunity with the Lloyd Fraser Group to join the graduate scheme, and I jumped at it. It just felt like the most interesting of the 3 options, so I just went for it.
So that was your starting point, and not so many years. But time passes quickly as well. But having worked in the industry for the length of time that you have, what does it mean to you working within this industry?
Well, I feel like I've grown up in the world of logistics and supply chain because I've been in it since I graduated, and this is just over 20 years now, and that seems like a long time. But going back I think even in my first few years of university, I couldn't really have imagined choosing it as a career. I wasn't even aware of it, to be quite honest. But as I've evolved personally through my career, I've had so many different and interesting roles that have challenged me in a number of ways. You mentioned I started as a business analyst, then I moved to process improvement, then I ended up in innovation, and now in market development. So you just never know where these things are going to take you. I guess you've got to follow what you're curious about, what you're interested in, and that takes you on a journey itself. But the industry is pretty close to my heart, and I'd love to see in the future that supply chain and logistics is seen as one of those subjects, a bit like finance, a bit like marketing. You know about it, you're aware of what it means and what it looks like in terms of job opportunities as well. So I guess that's my little passion, that I hope that one day it will be up there, with those other subjects.
And I think that's a fantastic expression. And if I can share with you, I'm utterly fascinated by supply chain and logistics, and have been I'm into my 4th decade of being fascinated with it. And I just think it is the magic behind the scenes that makes everything happen. And I actually do think it is magical in terms of what it achieves. And I can't imagine working in a discipline that was more magical, more interesting, more complex. And I think you're a perfect exemplar of somebody that has got the bug, as it were. And you've then done what a lot of people can do, which is wander through and say, well, this looks interesting, let's go and have a look at it. And I think it's a great industry for doing that in.
It certainly is. And I think, just to add, there's lots of opportunities within the industry. And I'd say that I've been given those, but also when I've asked for opportunities, I think the industry is really open to letting you try, letting you jump in, letting you get your hands dirty to see what it is that you like. Because there's so many different roles to experience that's such a possibility for people.
Absolutely, 100% agree. So, jumping back into the time machine and coming to the present day, why are you so passionate about your role at Dematic?
I guess because, it's quite a unique role. It requires, of course, experience in the given markets that I mentioned, so grocery and third-party logistics. And I guess I've cultivated that experience throughout that 20 years of my career history. And my passion really comes from a somewhat selfish place, in that for me to be my best and to be happy, I need to keep learning. I've recognized that. And part of my job, it's an absolute requirement to be learning constantly about the industries, the customers within it, what's happening, what are the challenges, and how we as a business, how Dematic can actually help that customer to do what they do and do it better. So that is something that I really enjoy. But I guess if I say what I love about it is that it's a kind of supporting role, an advisory role. And that's something that I found throughout my career is something that I really thrive in, empowering others with information, to help them to do their job better. Makes me feel good as well. So that's why I guess I'm kind of quite passionate about it.
And of course, anything that is associated with bringing intelligence into logistics and bringing automation into logistics, it has been a thing for a number of decades now. But there is probably a greater imperative now in order to be able to look at how do we make what is developed into an incredibly complex industry. How can we actually optimize and deal with things like labor shortages, because they do exist and they're a challenge, and how can we meet a much more complex service profile? So again, omnichannel has been with us for some time, but yet it goes ever and ever more demanding and more complicated, and then we're going to have to do all sorts of things about looking at sustainability, and there are a huge number of challenges rolling down the line at the industry. What would you say for the moment, if you were looking at Dematic as a business, what do you think is its biggest challenge at the moment, and what do you think is its biggest opportunity?
I think from a challenge perspective, it's like what you say about things like omnichannel. The infrastructure of many of our customers and the industries that we serve are so very different and increasingly complex at the same time. So you are having to cater to many different needs, but at the same time, it's a good challenge to have, and one that Dematic's really up for, and has been working with a number of customers to solve complex challenges like that. And like omnichannel, we saw the rise of e-commerce in COVID times. It was quite a quick growth in that time that a lot of companies had to deal with very quickly, and many turned to automation to help them to do that. That's just one example, really. So the opportunity really is that we're in a good position to be able to help customers like that to solve those complex supply chain issues, increase their visibility, solve that labour shortage problem as well, many industries are experiencing. I mean, if I just turn to grocery as a market, for example, that logistics space is quite challenging at the moment. Things like SKU proliferation. The end consumer is wanting more and more variety. They're wanting more convenience, and that comes with some headaches and ultimately cost for grocers. So how can you overcome those? And that's a challenge that certainly in my role and that Dematic really thrives on.
I mean, I absolutely hear that. And again, it's sort of interesting that we see SKU proliferation for sure. I don't know, but I think sometimes I probably order the same groceries pretty much every week, and it only varies maybe about 5%, but it's sort of interesting. Everybody's different. For sure, you're getting a much higher number of SKUs needing to be delivered. I think for us, having had some experience working with e-commerce businesses, the absolute fascination that we saw, we know about peaky demand pretty much anywhere. So all industries are different. But I think that through my career, I've been wandering through the foothills, and then all of a sudden you sort of look at e-commerce, and it's like the Himalayas. It's or Everest 5 times that. If you're looking at the impact of Black Friday or Christmas, or in some cases start of school holidays, depending on the business. And for any business that isn't using a level of automation, that gives you a tremendous challenge in terms of human resources and how you actually make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And really, the key goal for a lot of organizations is, with those challenges, how do they design an operation that is agile, flexible, responsive? Because things do change, things do crop up. And that's the ultimate, really. Agility is what people are looking for. And yet, as you say, solutions like automation and robotics and software can really give you that muscle to do that.
So, Danielle, what's been your best career experience so far?
My best experience so far, I'd probably say it's my career today. And I guess that's because I'm using all that knowledge and experience over the past 20 odd years to actually help others, but I'm still learning, if that makes sense. I feel quite connected. You
never stop learning. I will give you that. You've got at least another 20 years of continuing to learn.
That's good, because I like it. So that's quite good. And I suppose I feel connected to the industry that I work in, as I said, because I've grown up in it. But that also comes with networking with other people within the industry to create those bonds that are a bit like family. I don't know if you're like me, that when you go to certain events in the industry, like conferences, that you bump into people on a regular basis, and it's nice, it's comforting. And a lot of learning comes from meeting different people across the industry. So that's nice, because I mean, I love that people aspect of things. I'd say the other thing that really makes today my best career experience is the whole work-life balance piece. It's the best that it's ever been. And yes, COVID probably was a bit of a driver of that, because it's kind of promoted the hybrid kind of working system that just works really, really well for me. I'm a bit of a morning person, so I'm a lark. So I quite like to get up early, and that's when I produce my best work. It's really bizarre, because I actually feel like I'm still asleep, but I make a cup of tea, sit down, and I crack on. And I've produced some of my best stuff really early in the morning. Sometimes I don't even know how it happens, but yeah, I think being able to work from home has helped me actually produce better work, because I can just get out of bed, make a cup of tea, and start working.
You see, I am the yang to your yin in terms of this. So people that know me know that, fine, I can wake up in the morning, but it's going to be a few hours before actually the mildly amusing grumpiness disappears and the brain fog disappears. But then I'm then at the end of the day, I'm probably at my brightest. But these are habits that were baked in early in a career, because I was really production planning for a major manufacturing site, and I discovered the view that if I worked late, I didn't get so many telephone calls in the evening about, or in fact in the middle of the night, about what had gone wrong. So I was sort of saying, well, okay, I was scenario building and saying, well, okay, if this happens, here's your alternative. If that doesn't work, here's your alternative. And, you know, the later you actually stayed, the clearer picture you've got in terms of what could go wrong and what you can do about it. But each to their own. We need both our early risers and our late finishers in this world, I think.
We do. And it does take time for you to work out what actually does work for you and make the most of it, actually, you know.
Absolutely agree.
Play to it.
So dare I ask you, what's been your worst career experience so far and what did you learn from it?
I'd probably perhaps bundle them into a category, really, of people challenges.
You know, people.
Yes.
They don't cause you any problems, do they?
So people are human. We've all got different experiencing and often we've got a different world going on inside our head. And I've certainly in the past 20 years had many character building experiences that evolved people interactions, whether that be conflicts, different ways of working, differences of opinions. But what I've learned, I suppose, over the time is to have a little bit of compassion for one, because you never really know what's going on in somebody's head and why they're behaving the way that they do. And that's also come from a fascination with psychology as well. You know, that's not something that came to me overnight. But also, I've learned that it's really important to build your own confidence and courage to be able to behave in a way that is true to you, that makes you feel like you're being authentic, you're saying and doing the right things, adhering to your values, I suppose, in a way. So, you know, I've learned to also stand up for myself and be true to myself in a way when I do come across behaviours that don't quite sit with me well. And as you say, Malcolm, it doesn't stop. You have these type of difficult interactions with people all the time. It's not going to go away because we're human, and you've just got to find a way of actually dealing with that, whether that's brushing it off because it was a one-off experience and maybe somebody's having a bad day, or actually, do you know what, I need to create a boundary and stand up for myself. And you grow in confidence over time.
I absolutely hear you, and it's sort of interesting. I guess the older I get, probably the more likely I could share some really interesting experiences of behaviour. You know, I've met a number of people that I would regard as being on the psychotic scale, without a shadow of a doubt, you know, fascinating behaviours. But I've also met some of the most warm-hearted, kind, empathetic and really supportive people within the industry, and fortunately I believe they're in the majority. That's the good news.
I would agree.
So, who's inspired you the most in your career and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think it's difficult for me just to select one person because so many people have inspired me for different reasons. But if I think about it, I suppose a pattern has emerged in that, well, it's people that care that have inspired me. Managers that have actually taken an interest, let's say, in me or others. You know, even the simple things of asking, you know, how are you? But really listening to your response and interacting and having a conversation with you. I guess from a leadership perspective, it's those that have perhaps carried themselves with, of course, you know, confidence and have acted with courage, but in a way and with behaviours that perhaps make others feeling included, that they matter, that it's not, let's say, ego driven, but it's more of a collective concern for the team, the people around. Those are really the types of people who inspire me, the ones that come across authentic, they live their values, they really demonstrate it, and that for me makes me want to follow that kind of person and be inspired by them.
That really is a clever answer, a very, very clever answer indeed. And I actually think we're in a pool of inspiration in the industry. I've had the great fortune of meeting a whole series of wonderful academics within logistics and supply chain who have created, I always refer to them as the three Allens in terms of the three professors that I've seen. So McKinnon, Braithwaite, and especially Professor Alan Waller, who I've got a huge amount of respect for their thinking within the industry. But I've also worked with I've had some tremendous bosses. I've had some that have been incredibly average, but I've had enough of those that sparked a difference. And I'm not suggesting that they were all cuddly at the time, but they were clear in terms of what they wanted. And they managed to press the right buttons to get me to do my best. And I think that's the key thing, to get people to do their best without damaging them.
It is true. And I'd say also those experiences with, average managers or ones that perhaps have not been that great at getting the best out of you, they also leave a mark as well in that, it teaches you what you don't want or what you don't need. And that's inspiration in a different way too.
There's a little bit of rebellious teenager that comes up because, as you go through a career, you'll be looking at somebody senior, and they might be behaving in an interesting way, and you'll look at them and say, "Well, when I grow up, I don't want to be that." And I've actually used that on a couple of occasions, saying, "No, that is exactly who I don't want to be," and that's helpful. That's a different way of dealing with, some of the more unreasonable elements there.
And I guess just to pick up on, what you said about there being lots of inspiration within the industry of logistics and supply chain. From very early on in my career, I discovered Women in Logistics, a very supportive group that really did contribute to helping me grow my own confidence, because they had a mentoring scheme which I applied for, and it was a voluntary thing, so you didn't have to pay, which was really good, because at the start of a career you don't really have that kind of funds to kind of focus on that kind of development or coaching. But yeah, I had many one-to-one sessions with a wonderful lady from Women in Logistics who really supported me very early on in my career. I'd actually quite like to give her a shout out.
Please do.
Kirsten Tisdale.
Kirsten is wonderful. It's somebody that I've known for such a long time. Look, if we can't engage all elements of our society, and we live in a very diverse world, if we can't engage all of the diverse elements into solving the problems of the future, we're idiots. And we have to actually create environments in which everybody can actually thrive. And I utterly celebrate the diversity that is within the logistics and supply chain world. And it is a far better place with more women in it, and we need more, than ever it was when I'm thinking back to the earlier days, going back to the 1980s, when there were more gender-specific roles, and some of the best operational leads that I've worked with have been women. I can't speak any more highly of to say, well, look, we need different skill sets, we need different approaches, and I think women bring a huge amount into this. It's like everything else. All right, that's an extremely broad brushstroke. It's like turning around and saying, are all women the same? No, they're not. Yeah, but what we have to do is not create environments in which the great talent that is contained within all of us as human beings is not encouraged to grow. And I really applaud Women in Logistics. I've had the great honour of speaking in front of one of their meetings, and please, more and more, please. Can't say any more than that. I really am a great fan of Women in Logistics, and as for Kirsten, there is nobody better at analytics that I've ever met.
Oh, absolutely. And she's got such a wealth of experience that it was a real privilege to be able to get her support and help.
What are you most proud of?
I'd probably say...
anything at all.
My book.
Oh, let's hear about it.
So I published a book called Confidence Through Courage.
Okay.
And... well, the reason that I wrote it really was I wanted to be able to share my experience of growing in confidence, really. Because when I started my career, I thought confidence was this fixed thing that you couldn't change or improve. And gosh, when I realized that you actually could, it was a real turning point, a light bulb moment, I suppose. And of everything that I've learned, I just thought, well, if I can do it, anyone can do it. So I thought I would capture some of my key learnings and techniques in a book that could help anyone grow confidence to kind of progress in their career. And something that I learned on the way of building my confidence was that you absolutely need courage. There's always going to be moments that you're going to be afraid of something. Just a simple example like presentations. I mean, I still get that feeling in my tummy before a presentation, but earlier on in my career, that was, a lot different, much more intense. But as you learn and grow throughout your career, you're always going to be afraid of that skill that you haven't quite mastered yet, but it is possible to master it. And your confidence grows as you find the courage to experience, to learn, and to try to grow it. So yeah, I guess that's something that I'm quite proud of doing, really.
I always have it in my mind, and I'm going to ask you another question about your book in a moment, but I always have it in mind that at least 90% of people around you want you to be successful.
Yes.
Whether or not that's true or otherwise, there's always going to be some voices that are, I don't know, a little bit not what you want to hear. But I believe that 90% of people in their hearts want everybody to be successful.
They do, and the main stumbling block is you yourself, and usually it's the thoughts within your own head telling you I can't do it. When actually, how do you know? You need to try.
Yep, you don't know.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm still not doing any skydiving though, Danielle. I don't care what you say. Where's the book available?
So the book is available through Amazon.
Amazon?
Yeah.
Right then. So, okay, we're going to put a link on the bottom of certainly our LinkedIn program. So I think what Danielle's got to say about this is really, really interesting. And we do need to have courage. And I think that is probably one of the wisest putting together of two words that I've heard. So, good. What do you wish you would have known when you started your career that you know now?
I guess it kind of links in with confidence again. That I wish I'd have known that it was something that you could actually grow and learn. Because I guess right at the start of my career, I probably played quite small. It was challenging for me to have a voice in a larger group. I was pretty afraid of doing that and having an opinion. And actually, it doesn't really matter the kind of experience that you've got, whether you've been in an organisation a year, 20 years, 5 minutes, your opinion matters because as human beings, we look at things very differently. So seeing the perspective of somebody who's fresh in an organisation and new is just as valid as somebody that's been there for 20 years that understands the culture. Because sometimes that culture might need a little change. So I guess I wish I known more about that side of things, that it's okay to share, it's okay to have a voice, and it doesn't matter if it's not even taken on board, if it's ignored, but you tried.
I mean, that's really, really honest, and thank you. I reflect on it. I've probably been a confident communicator, but I'm not uninjured by sometimes speaking out. For me, it is... When I'm recording this podcast, I have a fader, and it helps me. One is that you can't hear all my breathing when we have the quieter moments, or not as much. But the other thing, the fader is, I call it my shut up Malcolm moment. And I think that, those that are confident communicators need to leave, to provide a space for people that do have something to offer. You're in a meeting and you're surrounded by these biological supercomputers, and yet you're making so much noise that you can't get an output. I think that's, it's really, really interesting to reflect, and you've made me reflect as well. So thank you.
No problem. I mean, I'd just say if there's anybody who does have maybe young people in their team that are quite quiet actually in meetings, perhaps invite them to contribute. And that'll just give them a little bit of courage. I know they might feel like they're on the spot, but they'll get over it. It's fine. But just having that little invitation can show them that actually they're important. And by making them feel important and that they matter, you're starting to inspire them as well. See, that's just one little thing that you can do to help somebody else to grow in their career as well.
Good advice. Sound and good advice. I want you to go into your time machine now. I mean, as somebody that has worked in innovation within the logistics industry, and you're now really about market creation. If I said, I don't think it's easy to go ahead 50 years. I think that's difficult. But if we looked at maybe 10 years' time, what do you see are going to be the challenges that we are facing and the solutions that we need to find against those?
Yeah, sure. And I've thought a little bit about this kind of because my role necessitates that really. In that I think supply chains will get more complex and complicated. And I think what will drive that is things like omnichannel logistics. So we're integrating many different channels. The customer's buying in many different ways. So products need to be in different places, for example. And I think the only way to evolve that for operations and supply chains to be agile, flexible, and responsive is through things like automation, through software, through robotics. So that's one thing that will look quite complicated. So the infrastructure may well change. And we might see things or products, distribution centres being a little bit closer to the consumer. This is a trend you might have heard about already, whereby things like 20-minute cities might pop up where you can walk to a shop and do your shopping within 20 minutes or on a bicycle. You can do all of the necessary things, walking in 20 minutes. So how does a supply chain operation manage not only the demands of getting into, let's say, a city, but also if the distribution centres are on the outskirts, how do they effectively manage deliveries into those cities within those times? So that's, I guess, where my logic comes around, that we need to be more connected. Supply chains need to be highly visible for that to be workable. Also, I think there's a generational change as well. So we've got younger people entering the industry, or hope that we do. And things like attention spans are getting shorter, for example. So does that mean, and I've noticed it with myself as well, so not just the new generation of people coming in, but will we need things like gamification within our distribution centres and those roles that I see being more engineering type roles perhaps? And yeah, will there be a different kind of skill set? I think that's where my brain's going, of how we need to work quite differently, that may well evolve over the next 10 years. But hopefully it means that there are some interesting career choices to go with that. As I said before, that I'd like to see it become a mainstream career choice like marketing or finance. And I think some interesting career roles could evolve in the next 10 years.
Absolutely, and for sure. I mean, we look at the challenges ahead, and I like to think, although I'm mature, I still have my head in the future. And I absolutely agree, more local distribution. I think it'll become more complex as well. I think sustainability is going to become more and more of a key. So I predict instead of e-commerce, we might have S-commerce or sustainable commerce or slow commerce. Do you really need it right now? And that for me would be a very, very interesting choice. But you're going to have across the next 15 years or so, we're going to have the electrification of our transport networks. And there are big numbers of unknown. We're beginning to do some thinking about this, but there are big numbers of unknowns in terms of what are going to be the range, the payload, the capacity of the vehicles of the future, because they will dictate an awful lot about the distribution networks that we build.
They will, and I think you're right around sustainability. It's a key agenda item for the future, and it'll be interesting to see how that impacts things like convenience. will there be a tipping point that says, well, actually, because I want to be more sustainable in my environment, will I accept a 2-day delivery instead of a next day delivery, for example? Will we see that kind of change? So that would be quite interesting.
I have a passion for Dematic. I want you to build us some floating fulfillment centres. That's what I would like to see, with all the automation associated with them. And, we've got this big resource around us as an island. I think a floating fulfillment centre could be really, really quite interesting and take a lot of trucks off the road. But there you go.
That could be interesting. Well, I do work with the product development teams within Dematic, because obviously they need to know the needs for the future. So I'll be sure to pass that on.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, you make this Captain Pugwash very, very happy indeed. But there we go. What's fundamentally changed about your work from when you started until now?
I think working habits more than anything. So firstly, there being more of a hybrid structure for working from home. That's a big change. I've gone from being, well, in every role apart from this one, I've been in the office pretty much every day unless I was visiting an operation or a site or a customer, for example. So that change has come in, which has given me, I suppose, a better work-life balance, being from home mainly. But the other thing that has changed is communication. So like Teams, for example, or Zoom conversations. So a lot of my day is spent in front of the computer on Zoom or Teams. It's a lot different from when I started. It was a lot of in-person meetings, lots of them. That hasn't changed. The meetings still exist in their quantities. We're more used to now working remotely. And what's interesting is that I'm part of a global team. So I'm quite often on calls with the Americas, with Asia Pacific, and that's opened a real door for me in terms of, one, meeting new and interesting people, but also learning about the cultures behind the scenes. Yes, we talk about work and get all that done, but it's really nice to hear about what people are doing in their local areas, what's important to them, what they're celebrating. That's really quite interesting for me.
So, moving towards the conclusion of this, which has been a really fascinating journey for me, and thank you for that. What occupation other than your own would you like to try?
That's easy.
Go on.
Floristry.
Really?
Yes.
Fantastic.
So let me explain. So over the past couple of years, I've set up a cutting garden on the allotments in the village that I live. And it's just provided me with such escapism. And whilst I'm not very good at propagating seeds for flowers, luckily my husband's very good at that. I really enjoy the process of seeing them actually grow, nurturing them and then seeing, well, will they actually grow into what they ought to look like, which is the picture on the packet, or will there be something completely different? And it's fascinating. So my favourite part actually about the growing flowers is arranging them. So this is why I think, floristry could be really quite interesting.
So my next question is going to be, and it might be answered already, if you could start a business tomorrow, what would that business be?
Well, it probably wouldn't be floristry.
Oh, no!
Even though I'd like to try it. I think the business would be connected to the second hat that I wear, in that I do career coaching and education, and I really like to expand that to be able to help more and more people just really be themselves in their careers, be their best. But I have that understanding that in order to do that, you really do have to grow your confidence and work with courage to really reach your best in your career. So that's something that I'd like to progress, really. Yeah.
So in the last couple of minutes of the interview, a couple of questions. Do you think it's a good idea for people to consider the logistics and supply chain industry as a top 3 career choice? And if you do, tell me why.
I do. And it's not just because I'm in the industry. I think, there are so many different job opportunities within it. So even if you don't know what you want to do, which is quite often the way when you finish university, or start out in your career, there's a real opportunity to try a number of different roles. So, for example, if you started as a graduate trainee, you could try your hand at working within the operation and leading a warehouse operation. You could have a go at the transport operation and do the same. Or like me, you could move into something like business development to see what it's like engaging with customers or improving processes. But you could equally end up in finance or marketing, because all of those disciplines exist as well. So I'd say it's just got so many varied roles and opportunities. And I think the industry is really welcoming to just let people have a go and try.
I couldn't agree more. I'd also say we are the industry with the best toys of any other industry. I think we have some wonderful toys that, we can see and play with and optimize, and this connects together with this. I mean, it's like an enormous game of Lego.
Yes.
That's maybe how I view it, but there you go.
It's true. And you could end up in something like innovation or automation, playing with even bigger toys,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to someone just starting out? How does somebody that's interested in a career, what would be a good starting point from your perspective?
I'd say, well, certainly follow any curiosities that you've got, for sure, because they link to things that you're potentially really good at or have strengths in. But if you're interested in a career specifically within logistics and supply chain, speak to somebody in the industry. And speak to people in different roles as well, just to get their view. If you're interested perhaps in operations, then have a chat to somebody in operations. If you're interested in innovation automation, speak to somebody like me, but also the middle ground opportunities as well. I would say to just get some first-hand feedback from people that work within the industry.
Wonderful advice. Danielle, I've really enjoyed our conversation, and it's been lovely to get to know you a little bit better. I really do celebrate the industry when I find people like you within it who are incredibly both IQ high and EQ high, and these are the sorts of leaders that we need for the future. And been an absolute delight to listen to you and to hear about your journey. So, Danielle, just simply thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thanks for having me. It's been an absolute delight.
So that's it from this podcast. Just a reminder, you can catch up with all the previous episodes of the Logistics Collective podcast on our website, logisticdscollective.com, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And remember to click follow, and we'll let you know when the next episode is released. Until next time, bye for now.
You can get in contact by email, podcast@logisticscollective.com, or leave a voice message on our website, logisticscollective.com. The podcast is a production by Loguru.